On a small country platform in Argentina, sometime in the early years of the 20th century, a group of young men stepped down from a train, dressed almost like bankers. Their shoes were polished, their ties were neat, their collars were stiff and white, and their hats sat at careful angles. And they had come, of all things, to play football in the dirt. Good evening, and thank you for being here tonight. Settle in wherever you are. Lower the lights, let your shoulders drop, and let the day slide off you like a coat you no longer need to wear. Tonight, we're traveling to Argentina. In the years around 1900, when Buenos Aires was growing quickly, ships were arriving at the port crowded with newcomers, and the railways carried people, goods, and very English sporting customs across the country. British clubs, railway employees, Italian and Spanish immigrant neighborhoods, Saturday matches, stiff collars, brushed hats, and carefully saved coins all belong to our story this evening. And although there will be football in the background, this is not really a sports story. It is a story about clothes. More specifically, it is about why early footballers in Argentina, including men who were not wealthy at all, often appeared in photographs and at stations dressed with astonishing care. Why would a young man who worked long hours, lived modestly, and saved every coin he could spend so much of his wages on a proper suit? Why wear fine wool and polished leather on the way to a rough field? Why arrive looking like a gentleman, even when everyone knew the afternoon would end in dust, sweat, and aching feet? The answer lies in the quiet rules of class and respectability. In early Argentine football, especially in its British-influenced beginnings, clubs, social rooms, committee tables, and official photographs carried the manners of upper and middle-class life. A jacket could speak before a man did. A clean collar could soften suspicion. A well-brushed hat could suggest that its owner knew how to behave in rooms where he had not always been expected. Along the way, we'll step onto a wooden railway platform in the province. We'll glance into Buenos Aires clubs with dark floors and framed team photographs on the wall. We'll visit immigrant streets, where laundry hangs across narrow courtyards. We'll spend a little time in a tailor's shop that smells of wool, chalk, and warm steam. And we'll follow coins saved in a tin box week after patient week, until they became something a young man could wear with pride. If you enjoy these slow, cozy journeys into the small details of the past, take a moment to subscribe. It helps more than you know, and it means we can keep telling these quiet stories together. And if you'd like, leave a comment before you drift off, and tell me about a piece of clothing you once saved up for. Something that made you feel a little more ready for the world. That is the only thing I'll ask of you tonight. From here on, you do not need to do anything at all. You can keep your eyes closed. You can lose track of a sentence or two. The story will carry on gently without you. So let the room grow still around you, and let us go back to that little station, where the train is just now sighing to a stop, and some of the best-dressed young men from miles around are stepping down onto the boards. The platform is made of sun-warmed wooden boards, and it creaks softly underfoot. The air smells of coal smoke, dry grass, and warm dust. Somewhere beyond the fence, cattle move slowly through a yellow field. Then the young men appear. They step down one by one, each in a jacket, each with a hat set just so. Their trousers are pressed. Their leather shoes catch the golden light of late afternoon. A farmer leaning on a fence post straightens up to look. He is not quite sure what he is seeing. These men look like visiting businessmen, or perhaps the sons of a landowner come to inspect the property. But then he notices the bags at their feet. Scuffed leather bags, and from one of them, the round shape of a football pressing against the seams. It makes no sense at all. Gentlemen dressed like this do not usually come to kick a ball in the dirt. And yet, here they are. The mismatch is quietly funny. A silk tie above a dusty road. A white collar under a hot sky. A young man dressed for a formal call on his way to chase a ball across a field. That small puzzle, the fine suit standing on the humble platform, is the whole story we are here to unfold. They gather their bags and set off down a country road toward the pitch. The road is little more than two ruts worn into dried mud. with weeds growing up the middle. There is something charmingly odd about the sight. A tie flutters in the breeze above a shallow puddle. A polished shoe steps carefully around a patch of soft ground. A young man in an immaculate blazer pauses to let a cow amble across the path, tipping his hat as though greeting a lady at a garden party. They walk without hurry, chatting among themselves. To a stranger, they might be heading to a wedding, or perhaps returning from church. Nothing about them says they are about to run, sweat, and slide across a rough field. But every man on that road has made a choice. The fine clothes are not vanity. Or not only vanity, they are practical in a social sense, even if they are entirely impractical in the mud. To understand why, we have to leave this dusty road for a while and step into the world where Argentine football first learned its manners. In the late 19th century, football in Argentina grew around British communities, railway companies, schools, and sporting clubs. Matches were being organized in Buenos Aires by the 1860s and 1870s, and by the 1890s the game had a more regular club life, with teams, fixtures, committees, and newspaper notices. Many early clubs carried the tone of British social institutions. Not every room was grand and not every player was wealthy, but the ideal of the gentleman amateur hovered over the game. Sport came with rules, but also with manners. One dressed properly. One shook hands properly. One behaved as if the field and the clubroom were connected by the same invisible thread. Picture a clubroom in Buenos Aires around the turn of the century. The floors are polished dark wood. Lamps throw a warm amber glow across the walls. There are framed photographs of teams standing in rows, their hair combed, their jackets buttoned, their expressions solemn in that old photographic way. Football, in these rooms, belonged partly to the world of cricket, tennis, rowing, and railway recreation. It was played outdoors, of course, but much of its authority lived indoors, among secretaries, treasurers, club presidents, and committees. To belong here, talent helped. But manners helped too. Clothing helped. And for a young man looking in from the outside, that was a lesson worth noticing. Some doors are locked not with keys, but with unspoken rules. Early sporting clubs often had a great many of those. There was rarely a sign that said newcomers were unwelcome. No one needed to make a scene. Instead, the boundaries could be perfectly polite. A membership fee set just high enough, a recommendation quietly required. A small uncertainty about whether a man came from the right sort of background. Imagine a working man in modest clothes standing outside a club entrance in the evening light. The brass fittings gleam. Voices murmur inside. He hesitates on the step, aware not only of the money in his pocket, but of his cuffs, his shoes, his accent. Nothing unkind has been said. Nothing needs to be. This was the kind of world into which the game had been introduced, and at exactly the same time, Argentina was changing quickly. Between the late 19th century and the early 20th, millions of immigrants arrived, especially from Italy and Spain. Buenos Aires became a city of boarding houses, conventillos, street vendors, workshops, cafes, and accents from across the Atlantic. Football was not going to stay behind polished doors for long. In the crowded neighborhoods of Buenos Aires, boys discovered football wherever there was space enough to run. They played in streets, empty lots, courtyards, and patches of open ground near railway lines. They did not always have proper equipment. A ball might be bought, borrowed, repaired, or improvised. In many memories of early street football, boys made do with bundles of rags, stuffed leather, or whatever could be kicked without immediately falling apart. The point was not perfection. The point was movement. Laundry hung above narrow courtyards. Mothers called from windows. A cart rolled past, and the game paused just long enough to let it through. Then the shouting began again, quick and bright, echoing between the walls. Some of these boys became excellent players. They learned balance from uneven streets and quickness from crowded spaces. They learned to make a pass before a horse cart interrupted the play. They learned skill because they played whenever time allowed. What they lacked was not desire or even ability. What they often lacked was access to the respectable structures of the game. The club lists, the formal matches, the committee rooms, the official photographs, and so a practical thought began to form. If the gatekeepers expected a certain appearance, perhaps appearance could be learned. Here we arrive at the heart of the mystery. The suit was not merely decoration. It was a social language. A working-class player could see how the better-off men presented themselves. The brushed hat, the smooth lapel, the clean collar, the careful gloves, the way a man stood when he expected to be welcomed. A collar, in particular, mattered more than we might imagine now. In the early 20th century, detachable collars were common among men who wanted to look respectable. They could be stiffened, laundered, and kept bright, while the shirt beneath did more ordinary work. A white collar was not only cloth, it was a little flag of cleanliness, discipline, and aspiration. Picture a young man at a basin in the morning, carefully washing, shaving if he can, combing his hair with water, and fastening a collar that is perhaps a bit uncomfortable. It presses at the neck. It asks him to hold his chin a little higher. It is not relaxed clothing. It is clothing with expectations, and that was part of the point. A man dressed this way seemed to understand the code. He might still be poor. He might still live in a crowded room, but for an afternoon, in the eyes of strangers, he could appear orderly, serious, and worthy of being addressed with respect. A good suit was far beyond what a laborer could spend on a whim. It might represent weeks or months of careful saving, depending on wages, fabric, and whether the garment was made by a tailor, altered secondhand, or bought ready-made. So he saved, coin by coin, week by week. A dream was measured out in set-aside wages. Picture a small rented room, lit by a single lamp in the evening. On the wooden table sits a tin box, and inside it, a slowly growing pile of coins. A young man adds to it after each week of work. Some weeks he can add only a little. Some weeks, when rent is due or shoes need mending, he adds nothing at all. He simply looks at the box, closes the lid, and waits. There were choices to make. Dark wool was useful because it hid wear. Navy, charcoal, brown, and black could all seem respectable if brushed well. A waistcoat made the outfit feel complete. A hat was almost essential. A tie, even a modest one, gave the whole arrangement a sense of intention. Ready-made clothing was becoming more available in many cities, but a tailor still carried special meaning. A fitted suit said that someone had measured you. Someone had taken your shoulders seriously. Someone had shaped cloth to your body, not simply handed you whatever happened to be on a rack. And when the box was finally full enough, the young man would put on the best of what he already owned, comb his hair, and walk to the tailor's shop with the coins wrapped carefully in his pocket. The shop is small and warm, and it smells of wool, chalk, and steam. Bolts of fabric lean against the walls in soft towers of gray and brown and navy. Chalk lines mark the work table. A dress form stands patiently in the corner, half pinned with someone else's coat. The tailor is a calm, unhurried man. He looks the young fellow over, then reaches for his measuring tape. He works quietly, murmuring numbers, draping the tape across shoulders and down an arm. A pin here, a gentle turn there. There is a soft hiss as the pressing iron meets damp cloth and a curl of steam rises into the lamplight. Dust motes drift slowly through the warm air. Outside, the street carries on, but in here, everything moves at the pace of careful hands. The tailor knows the small secrets of respectability. He knows where cloth can be let out later, if a man grows broader. He knows how to make inexpensive fabrics sit more handsomely. He knows that a sleeve just a little too long can make a man look unfinished, and that a clean line at the shoulder can give him confidence before he says a word. He listens as much as he measures. He understands that this suit is not only for Sunday walks or family photographs. It may be for a club visit, a team journey, a formal dinner, a first appearance among men who notice these things. Slowly, over the fittings that follow, he does something close to quiet magic. He helps a young man look as though he belongs in places that have not yet decided to welcome him. Owning one good suit was not the same as owning a wardrobe of them. A wealthy man could damage a jacket and reach for another. A player with one treasured suit had to treat it almost like a fragile instrument. So match day began before the match. It began with brushing. Picture him standing near a window where the morning light is good. He holds the jacket by the shoulders and works a clothes brush gently down the fabric. Dust lifts. A little lint disappears. He checks the cuffs for fraying. He studies the elbows for shine. He rubs his shoes until the leather catches the light. A hat brush might be used with the same care. A tie is smoothed. A collar stud is found in a drawer, then almost lost, then found again. This is a very old kind of domestic suspense. Quiet, but sincere. If he lives with family, someone may help. A sister notices a loose button. A mother warns him not to step through puddles. Someone remarks that he looks very fine, and he pretends not to enjoy the compliment too much. Then he leaves for the station or the tram, trying not to wrinkle what he has just perfected. He is already performing long before the whistle blows. A perfect appearance is a fragile thing. It can be undone by rain, dust, sweat, or one careless stain from a cafe table. There was a quiet strain in all of this. To wear the image of ease while living without much ease at all. To look effortless while working very hard to make it so. Respectability required maintenance, and maintenance required time, money, and attention. Imagine the young man after a journey stepping into a washroom or a borrowed room near the field. He removes his jacket and hangs it carefully. He folds his tie. He puts the collar where it will not be crushed. The football clothes, much plainer and rougher, can take the afternoon's work. The suit must be preserved for the return journey. The handshake, the photograph, the sight of being seen. This is one of the little absurdities of social life. The clothing most needed to gain respect is often the clothing least suited to the actual work being done. And yet the work of being respected can be as real as any labor. Nowhere was the reason clearer than at the stadium or club ground, where seating often mirrored society with startling honesty. The wealthier spectators had better views, more shade, more comfort, and more room to breathe. Ladies might sit with parasols. Gentlemen might wear light suits in summer, fanning themselves in the afternoon heat. Elsewhere, the working crowd stood more tightly packed, hats pulled low against the glare. Even the seats seemed to know who was who, where you sat, or whether you sat at all. Told part of the story of where you belonged. In such a place, a player's careful clothing could ease his movement between worlds. He might stand among teammates from different backgrounds. He might greet a club official. He might appear in a team photograph that would be kept, printed, or remembered. Clothing did not erase class. It did not solve everything. But it could soften an edge, especially in those first moments when people made quick judgments. Surviving photographs from the early decades of Argentine football often showed teams and officials dressed with great formality away from the field. Jackets buttoned, collars crisp, hats in hand or on head, faces composed. These images do not tell us every motive, but they do show a culture in which public appearance mattered deeply. The suit was part of the match day world, even when it never touched the ball. Old team photographs are wonderfully serious things. The men stand or sit in rows arranged like a small parliament. Some fold their arms, some rest a hand on a teammate's shoulder. One man holds the ball as though it were an official document. In photographs of clubs from Buenos Aires and other Argentine cities in the early 20th century, the contrast can be striking. On the field, players wore practical kit. Off the field, they often appear as composed young gentlemen. The camera loved order, and so did the social world around it. A photograph could travel farther than a man. It might appear in a newspaper, hang in a clubhouse, rest on a family mantle, or be tucked into an album. It could tell future employers, neighbors, and relatives that this young man was not merely a boy from the street. He was part of a club. He stood among respectable men. He had been recorded. That mattered. In a society where many families were newly arrived and still finding their place, public image could be a delicate treasure. Respect was not always freely given. Sometimes it had to be dressed for, posed for, and preserved behind glass. In time, Argentine football grew more confident, more popular, and more visible. Clubs such as Alumni in the early years, and later Boca Juniors, River Plate, Racing, San Lorenzo, and others, became part of a much broader football culture. The game was no longer only a British pastime. It had become deeply Argentine. When teams traveled, clothing carried even more meaning. Players boarding ships or trains did not represent only themselves. They could seem to represent their club, their neighborhood, and eventually their country's modern image. Picture a group on the deck of an ocean liner, elegant against the gray sea. Suitcases are stacked nearby. Hats are held against the wind. The men look polished, almost ceremonial. When they stepped ashore in another country, they wanted to appear not as rough strangers, but as disciplined, stylish young men from a nation that deserved attention. This was especially important in an era when Argentina liked to imagine itself as modern, prosperous, and cosmopolitan. Buenos Aires had grand avenues, cafes, theaters, department stores, and an appetite for European fashion. A footballer in a well-cut suit fitted neatly into that picture, even if his own life was much more modest than the image suggested. Once again, the clothes did extra work. And it was tiring in ways no one always saw, to be impeccable every single hour. Every meal asked for good manners. Every handshake asked for composure. Every photograph asked for a straight back and a calm, confident face. There was little room to simply be a young man who was hot, tired, hungry, and far from home. Picture one of them at the end of such a day, alone at last in a hotel room. He closes the door. He loosens his tie slowly. He sets his hat on the table and sits on the edge of the bed in the warm glow of a single lamp. His face is tired but at peace. For a little while, he does not have to be anyone's idea of a gentleman. The jacket hangs over a chair, recovering its shape. The shoes wait by the wall, dulled slightly by the day. A collar lies on the washstand like a small white crescent. There was real discipline in that daily effort, and a quiet weariness behind those polished smiles. It deserves to be noticed gently. All these years later, as the years passed, the game kept growing, and the world around it slowly loosened. Football spread out from British clubs, railway teams, schools, and formal associations into neighborhoods across the country. Crowds swelled. Players became known for their skill, their speed, their daring, and the beautiful things they could do with the ball. Little by little, respect came more readily for what they did on the field, rather than for how they dressed off it. The old need to look quite so gentlemanly began to soften. A great player no longer had to prove he belonged by matching a club president's lapel. His feet had already made the argument. The fine suit did not vanish, but its purpose changed. What had once been urgent slowly became tradition, and then a fond habit. Somewhere, a beloved old suit was folded and passed down. An older man handed it to a younger one, wrapped in tissue paper, in a modest room with afternoon light coming softly through lace curtains. The cloth carried memory into a new pair of shoulders. Some inheritances are never written in wills. They are simply folded carefully and given, hand to hand, and the little rituals grew quieter. A hat brushed and left on a chair, a jacket aired near an open window, collar studs resting in a small dish, a shoe brush tucked into a drawer with a tin of polish gone dry around the edges. The tailor's shop stayed warm in the evening. The pressing iron still hissed. The tailor still measured shoulders and marked cloth with chalk, but the work felt less heavy with social necessity. Men still wanted to look handsome. Of course they did. That part of human nature remains very dependable. But the suit no longer had to carry quite so much hope on its seams. The suits stayed beautiful. They just stopped having to explain so much. What was once a shield became a keepsake, and then, in time, a warm and quiet memory. In a small room, on a bedside table, there rests an old photograph in a plain frame. It shows a young footballer from long ago, dressed with perfect care. His suit fits him beautifully. His collar is clean, his tie neat, his hat held lightly in one hand. He gazes out of the picture with calm, steady pride, A young man who knew what his clothes had cost him and what they had helped him become. The glass has gathered the faint dust of years. A lamp glows nearby, warm and low, and the light rests softly on his face. The suit tells much of his story, without a single word. The saving, the fittings, the careful brushing, the long walk down a country road, the quiet satisfaction of being greeted as if he belonged. Outside, the evening settles. Somewhere far off, a train moves slowly through the dark. In a drawer, perhaps, a collar stud waits in silence. On a chair, an old hat keeps its shape. And the young man in the photograph goes on looking out, patient and content, into a night that asks nothing more of him. Thank you for spending this quiet time with me tonight, in the company of long-gone players and the treasured suits they wore. It is a gentle thing to remember, how people everywhere have dressed to feel worthy, to belong, to be seen as equals in rooms that did not always welcome them. A jacket, a hat, a clean collar, a well-tied knot. Small things carrying such large hopes. There is nothing left for you to do now. No door to walk through, no coins to count, no lapel to straighten. You can let all of it drift away. Rest easy tonight. Let your breathing slow and let the day go. The old story will keep itself, and it will be here again whenever you'd like to return. Sleep well. Good night.